On May 14, 1984, a woman named Penny Anderson was found murdered in her Springfield, Massachusetts apartment. She had been stabbed more than 60 times. Her infant son was in the next room, unharmed. 3 days later, police arrested 22-year-old Edward Wright. He was her friend. He was the last person seen with her alive. And for the next 41 years, he would insist he was innocent. This is the story of how a single hidden document and a detective's lie under oath stole 4 decades from an innocent man. I'm covering this case because it shows exactly how wrongful convictions persist. The prosecution's case rested on one piece of physical evidence: shoe impressions found in blood at the crime scene, impressions that allegedly matched Edward Wright's shoes. But there was a problem. Someone had broken into that apartment while it was still an active crime scene. Evidence was potentially contaminated. And the detective who documented that break-in, he told the jury it never happened. That lie in the report that proved it would remain buried for 37 years. When it finally surfaced, it would unravel everything. To understand what happened to Edward Wright, you need to understand Springfield, Massachusetts in 1984. A working-class city. A police department under pressure to close cases. Penny Anderson was 31 years old. She lived in a modest apartment with her infant son. On the night of May 13th, she was seen entering her building around 1 in the morning. Edward Wright was with her. They were friends. Multiple witnesses confirmed this. What happened after they entered the building would become the subject of a 41-year legal battle. The next morning, Penny Anderson's body was discovered. She had been stabbed more than 60 times. Her infant son was found unharmed in another room. The brutality of the attack shocked even veteran investigators. Edward Wright was arrested on May 17, 1984, 3 days after the murder. Police focused on him almost immediately. He was the last known person to see her alive. But there was another suspect investigators largely ignored. Penny Anderson's ex-boyfriend, Alan Smalls, had threatened her the night she was murdered. Multiple witnesses reported this. Smalls had lied about his alibi. The day after the murder, he attempted to sell a knife. And according to court records, he confessed to killing Penny Anderson not once but twice. None of this mattered to prosecutors. They had their suspect. They had their evidence. Edward Wright went to trial in 1985, and the case against him centered on one thing: those shoe impressions. Investigators had returned to the crime scene on May 18, 4 days after the murder, to remove linoleum tiles containing blood and shoe impressions. This was the forensic cornerstone of the prosecution's case. At trial, Detective Alfred Ingham testified under oath that no unauthorized person had entered the crime scene apartment. The evidence, he assured the jury, had not been contaminated or tampered with. This was a lie. Detective Ingham had personally documented a break-in at the crime scene that occurred while evidence was still being processed. He knew unauthorized access had occurred. He testified otherwise. That report documenting the break-in? It was never given to Wright's defense attorneys. For 37 years, it sat buried in police files while an innocent man rotted in prison. Edward Wright was convicted in 1985. He was 23 years old. He was sentenced to life in prison for a murder he did not commit. What the jury never knew, could never have known, was that the crime scene had been compromised. Someone had broken in. Evidence could have been moved, contaminated, or planted. The foundation of the case was rotten. In American criminal law, prosecutors have a constitutional obligation to disclose evidence that might help the defense. This is called Brady material, after the 1963 Supreme Court case that established the rule. The break-in report was textbook Brady material. It directly undermined the reliability of the prosecution's key evidence. Hiding it wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. Year after year, Edward Wright maintained his innocence. Year after year, his appeals were denied. He watched decades pass from behind prison walls. His 20s, his 30s, his 40s, his 50s. In 2015, the New England Innocence Project took on his case. They would spend the next 10 years fighting for his freedom. 10 years of legal battles, document requests, and dead ends. The breakthrough came in 2020, 37 years after the trial. For the first time, Wright's defense team received the police report documenting the crime scene break-in. The report proved what Wright had always claimed. The crime scene had been compromised before police collected their key evidence, and it proved something else, that Detective Ingham had lied under oath. The implications were devastating. The shoe impressions, the only forensic evidence tying Wright to the blood in the apartment, had been collected from a compromised scene. Their evidentiary value was essentially worthless. In April 2025, Judge Jeremy Bucci of Hampton County Superior Court vacated Edward Wright's conviction. His ruling was unsparing. Quote, "The prosecution knowingly and intentionally withheld significant exculpatory evidence." Those were the judge's words. Knowingly. Intentionally. This was not an accident. The judge continued, "A detective gave blatantly false testimony at trial concerning evidence central to the prosecution's case. Blatantly false. The system had failed Edward Wright at every level." On July 31, 2025, Edward Wright walked out of prison. He was 63 years old. He had spent 41 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. His family was there to meet him. His attorneys from the New England Innocence Project were there. After 4 decades of fighting, the truth had finally prevailed. But the story didn't end there. Wright's conviction had been vacated, but technically the charges still stood. Prosecutors had to decide whether to retry him or let it go. On August 21, 2025, prosecutors filed what's called a null prosequi, a formal declaration that they would not pursue the case. Edward Wright was officially exonerated. For 41 years, the system told Edward Wright he was a murderer. His friends believed it, strangers believed it, the official record said it, and all of it was built on hidden evidence and false testimony. And what about Alan Smalls, the ex-boyfriend who threatened Penny Anderson the night she died, lied about his alibi, tried to sell a knife, and confessed twice to the murder? He died before any investigation could occur. The actual killer, whoever that was, may never face justice. Penny Anderson's family may never have true closure. This is the collateral damage of a wrongful conviction. The real perpetrator walks free. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, official misconduct, prosecutorial or police misconduct, contributed to 54% of wrongful convictions on record. More than half. Edward Wright's case was textbook. The elements are depressingly familiar: tunnel vision investigators, hidden evidence, false testimony, and a system that makes accountability almost impossible. Understanding how wrongful convictions happen is the first step to preventing them. Brady violations, prosecutors hiding evidence favorable to defendants, are one of the leading causes. The rules exist, enforcement is the problem. Many states still use what's called closed-file discovery, meaning defense attorneys only see what prosecutors choose to share. Open-file discovery, where defense gets access to all police reports, could prevent cases like Wright's. Reform efforts are ongoing in many states. Some have created conviction integrity units within prosecutors' offices. Others have strengthened discovery requirements. Progress is slow, but it's happening. If you want to support this kind of work, organizations like the New England Innocence Project provide free legal representation to the wrongfully convicted. They rely on donations and volunteer attorneys. 10 years of work freed Edward Wright. Cases like this matter beyond the individual injustice. They reveal systemic failures that affect countless other defendants, many of whom never get the advocacy Edward Wright eventually received. If stories like this matter to you, subscribing helps us tell more of them. Every case we cover raises awareness about how the system fails and how it can be fixed. As of this recording, no disciplinary action has been announced against Detective Alfred Ingham for his false testimony or against the prosecutors who withheld the break-in report for 37 years. This reflects a broader pattern. Prosecutorial immunity and statute of limitations issues mean that even when misconduct is proven, the people responsible rarely face consequences. The system protects itself. Edward Wright lost 41 years to this system. His youth. His middle age, Birthdays, holidays, funerals, all experienced from behind bars or not at all. That time can never be returned. He entered prison in 1985 when Ronald Reagan was president and the first cell phones were being introduced. He left in 2025 into a world he barely recognized. Cases like Edward Wright's don't happen because of one bad actor, they happen because multiple failures compound: investigators who lock onto a suspect too early, prosecutors who hide inconvenient evidence, defense attorneys who lack resources to dig deeper, courts that defer to original verdicts, parole boards that require admission of guilt, something an innocent person cannot honestly provide. Each barrier makes exoneration exponentially harder. Wright filed 6 motions for post-conviction relief over 10 years before the New England Innocence Project finally succeeded. 6 attempts, each one denied until the hidden evidence finally surfaced. And even then, even after the evidence of prosecutorial misconduct was undeniable, the system moved slowly. From the disclosure of the break-in report in 2021 to Wright's release took 4 more years. For Penny Anderson's family, the exoneration raises painful questions. If Wright didn't kill her, who did? Alan Smalls, the alternative suspect with motive, opportunity, and confessions, died without ever being charged. This is often the unspoken tragedy of wrongful convictions. The focus on the innocent person in prison, which is entirely justified, can obscure the fact that somewhere a guilty person walked free. Penny Anderson was 31 years old when she was murdered. Her son, who was an infant that night, grew up without a mother and with a false narrative about who killed her. The lesson of Edward Wright's case isn't just about one man's wrongful conviction. It's about how easily the truth can be buried and how much work it takes to dig it back up. Brady v. Maryland was decided in 1963. 63 years later, prosecutors are still hiding evidence. The law exists. What's missing is enforcement and consequences. Edward Wright is free today. At 63, he's rebuilding a life that was stolen from him at 22. No amount of compensation can return those 41 years. But his case now stands as evidence, legal, documented, irrefutable of how the system can fail. And maybe, in some small way, that evidence will help prevent the next Edward Wright. For Case Files Explained, I'm covering this case because the truth matters even when it takes 41 years to surface. Until next time.